When you thought Battlefield 6 could do no wrong, yesterday came along and there was an announcement that just like Call of Duty, within the next 5 years, which is a long period of time, a lot can change in that, Battlefield will be going to an annual release cycle. In other words, there will be a new Battlefield every single year, and they want to go with the same thing of a new studio every year for 3 years. So literally the same model as Call of Duty. Ace put together a video on this one. I'm very curious to see what he has to say. But from what I've heard, no one wants this. Except for EA execs. They definitely want this.
What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today we got some news, or more so a leak or rumor regarding the potential future of the Battlefield franchise long term. This isn't really talking about Battlefield 6 in particular, but it more so appears to be looking at what happens next for the franchise. And this one's coming from Charlie Intel, and he says, industry...
Also, it is wild to see, like in video games, there is no chill and enjoy. Like as soon as, boom, Black Ops 7 comes out, oh, okay, well, I think my stream may have just crashed. Did it? Am I still streaming? Are you guys still here? We're still here. Okay, we're good. As I was saying, when it comes to things like video games, a game like Black Ops 7 will release, and then boom, just like that, we're going to be, oh, what about Modern Warfare 4? What about the next game? What about this next Sledgehammer game? There's no chill and enjoy. There just isn't.
Analyst Michael Patcher claims Battlefield GM told them they plan to have a yearly Battlefield game release, but it will probably take 5 years before this happens. And then he quotes, their goal is 3 studios making Battlefield on a 3-year basis so they can get to Battlefield annually. Now, of course, I want to be very clear up front. This is just a rumor at this point. It hasn't been officially announced or...
Basically, it is a CEO saying that this is what he would like to do as a way for Battlefield to make more money.
Confirmed by anybody at Battlefield. However, I do tend to believe this, largely because from a business perspective, long term, this actually kind of makes sense. And to be clear, I'm not saying I agree with it or like the sounds of this at all. And the general reception in the community to this news has been overwhelmingly negative. And I'm going to be sharing a list of reasons that this could be a really bad idea for Battlefield. However, before...
So, here's the thing. Call of Duty, I think, is learning their lesson right now. They're eating crow, if you will. Because what they have slowly learned is that if you're going to do a yearly release, each year has to be different. Good example, Modern Warfare 2, Black Ops 1, Black Ops 2, Modern Warfare 3. Those years, you had a Modern Warfare game, a game in the past, a Modern Warfare game, a game in the future. What we have right now, where we have a Modern Warfare game, a Modern Warfare game, a Black Ops game, a Black Ops game, doesn't work because people are just sick of it. The only way you can do the yearly crap is if each year is different. Another good example, EA releasing a Madden game every single year. The only time that they saw a massive increase in sales in a game like that was with the NCAA game that didn't come out for years before that. Right? It's hard to make this work, and Call of Duty barely makes it work.
Before doing that, I want to look at why they would even want to go this direction and sort of playing devil's advocate for the business perspective, especially looking at things long term. Now, obviously, if they do go in this direction, they're just following in the footsteps of Call of Duty. This is
100%.
taking the Call of Duty approach of annual releases and rotating through
That is true. The only time that they tried that was with Battlefield Hardline, and that is the lowest selling Battlefield game, I believe. So that is another good point.
studios. And from that business perspective, there are some obvious benefits here. First off, there is way more money to be made if you're releasing a brand new game every single year and if people are buying it. And since AAA games have been getting more and more expensive to not only make, but also support long term, of course, they want to be doing things to increase their revenue and their profits year after year. And so why make one game every 3 or 4 years, have a pretty big influx of cash flow when you first sell it, and then spend a lot of your resources supporting that game as your player count just naturally dwindles over time throughout that long life cycle of the game, when you can just release another one the next year, get another massive influx of profits, and then just continue repeating that. Additionally, looking at some potential positives to this, it allows for faster iteration and movement with
I don't know if you guys know this, but in Battlefield Hardline, you could drive a couch.
Trends, and correction for any missteps that take place. And Battlefield 2042 is a great example of this. That game at launch flopped pretty hard. I'm sure it definitely fell well below expectations for them. And while they have been steadily improving that game over time, it's actually in a much, much better state now than what it was in at launch. At the end of the day, they lost a huge portion of their potential player base within the launch window, and most of those players never came back and never will come back to Battlefield 2042, despite the fact that they invested so many resources in improving that game over time and support.
This is what I think happens in a different way with Call of Duty every single year. The game comes out, it launches in a decent state. It retains players, players enjoy it. And then 2 weeks before Christmas break, they put out season 1. And like any season with Call of Duty, when it comes out, it's buggy as hell, but then they go on Christmas break. The game all of a sudden feels unfinished, unpolished, no new content is coming out, and because of all of this, the game just loses all its players at the beginning of January. Every single year, the same thing happens year in and year out. And it's this problem, but on a different time scale.
Porting it properly for the people that did stick around. With an annual title, they could have basically just cut their losses on that and just focused really hard on making sure the next Battlefield game that comes out the year after fixes the main issues and mistakes that the previous one made, and then they can just sell that again. They get a big influx of players because it's a brand new game and a brand new release, so it'll actually bring a lot of the players that they lost when they launched the previous one, and that's just something that's very difficult to do with a game that's already launched and didn't launch in a good state. On top of this, many modern gamers, especially the younger gamers it seems, are known for having a shorter attention span, and they need constant engagement. So an annual release would capitalize on this, and it just ensures that they never have time to get bored of the franchise because there's always another one around the corner. By the time you start burning out on the current one, this is where you start hearing bits of information about the next one that's coming out, so you can start getting excited for that one. And Call of Duty players know this cycle all too well. And then finally, looking more at the big picture of the Battlefield brand, by having an annual release, it keeps that brand much more relevant and mainstream, because there will always be talk about the next Battlefield game that's coming up the next year. And again, this is something that happens with Call of Duty, and it's one of the reasons that Call of Duty is such a household name relative to many other FPS franchises out there. It's because there's always talk about the next one that's coming out, whereas with Battlefield, it seems like they have to remind much of the mainstream audience that they exist every 2 or 3 or even 4 years when they launch another one. So on the business end, especially looking at like big picture long term, I totally understand why they would be considering this approach. However, this does come with issues, especially for gamers, and that's the big problem here, and that's why I don't think this is a good idea for the Battlefield franchise, at least. And the first reason behind this is, first off, we would see a shorter...
By the way, I do agree with what you guys are saying in chat before. 3 years. I think Battlefield, 3-year cycle, with great post-launch support, 3 years. Maybe they could do 2, but yeah.
Development cycle, at least compared to what we just saw coming from Battlefield 2042 into Battlefield 6. That's a 4-year development cycle, whereas with this apparent plan that they've got in the future, they're going to be on a 3-year cycle. However, I was actually a little bit surprised to find, I look back at older Battlefield releases, I always thought they were like 3 to 4 years apart, but they were actually more like 2 to maybe 3 years apart in most cases. Like there was only a 2-year gap between Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4, and there was a 2-year gap between Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 5. I could have sworn it was a longer period of time, but no.
Almost every single Battlefield game that comes out is super buggy at launch, and that's why they did Battlefield Labs.
It was just a 2-year release. So I guess the shorter cycle doesn't necessarily always apply here, and in some cases they'd have a slightly longer cycle. However, the big difference here is it would be splitting those up across multiple studios. So instead of all of the studios working together on one game, and that's the next Battlefield game, you've got 3 different studios working on 3 different Battlefield games at the same time, and this can create issues, and we've seen issues like this come up with the Call of Duty franchise, and one of the main issues is creative differences between those studios. Naturally, each studio is going to have their own style and their own direction that they want to take things.
I think that's a good thing, though. I think it's good when the different studios have different design philosophies, and that's another one of the problems that Call of Duty's had lately, is where all of the studios are constantly all working on the games at the same time, like one working on zombies, one working on multiplayer, one working on campaign. All the games start to feel exactly the same, and then when they come out every year and they feel the same, people get burnt out. La da da
And
da
that
da.
might not match the direction that the other studios want to take things, and that could pull the franchise in multiple directions and lead to a loss of identity overall as a unified franchise. Additionally, another big potential issue with splitting up studios like this is you're also splitting up resources and talent across the 3 studios instead of putting all of that talent and all of those resources together to make one game with the highest quality possible, which would almost definitely lead to lower overall quality on a per game basis. And going off of that, when going this direction, I think it would be easy to fall into the trap of trend chasing rather than trend setting, and essentially always having to follow in the footsteps of the current Battlefield game that's out and learning lessons on the fly from those Battlefield games and making sure you're making adjustments to your Battlefield game before it launches so that it shows that you're taking steps forward from the previous one. And while that can lead to faster iteration,
If Warzone dies, we could see the dissolving of the Universal Engine. Potentially. I think the next new engine we're going to get is Modern Warfare 4, so we'll see what happens after that.
it could also lead to situations where it
But
feels
just to be clear, I think that when Warzone dies, DMZ2 or DMZ is going to be like the next Warzone.
like they're just trying to play catch up all the time, rather than taking the time to set a clear direction for themselves and really commit to those and take bigger leaps forward for the franchise. And then another note I want to make here is it does give them less time to polish the game post-launch. Like I said, Battlefield 2042, it launched rough, but they've had years to make improvements to it, and now I consider it to be in quite a good state overall. It's still got its issues. I think there are some issues that are just inherent to the game that realistically were never going to get changed, but it's in a significantly better state now than what it was in. Whereas if we had annual releases, they likely would have just abandoned 2042 and moved on to the next thing the year after, and it never would have gotten into a half-decent state. And then finally, one last thing on the negative side here, or the negative side for gamers at least, is the money side of things. While it makes them a lot more money to have annual releases, that money is coming from the gamers. It costs a lot more to stay relevant and up to date with the current Battlefield game if you do want to be playing the current Battlefield game
Anyway, let's see how broken that SMG
all the
is.
time, because you now have to buy that Battlefield game every single year to stay up to date. Now, for many, that's not a huge deal, and I still consider video games to be one of the cheapest forms of entertainment out there when you consider the cost versus the potential number of hours of enjoyment you get out of that cost. But still, it is a consideration, especially if you're getting a lower quality product due to the studios being split up, and you're paying for that product on a more consistent basis. So overall, from a gamer's perspective, I definitely don't like the sounds of this for the Battlefield franchise. I don't think it fits their franchise very well, because unlike Call of Duty players that have been conditioned to expect
Honestly, what you just said, Ace, is a pretty good way that they could actually hype a Black Ops 7. Is with like a black hole style event where the servers are shut down. Like, they haven't done anything like that. Like, almost as like a last resort to build hype. I could see them do something like that.
an annual release, and it's part of the DNA of the franchise is knowing that there's always another Call of Duty game around the corner. If you hate the current one, that's okay. There's another one coming out within a year, and you might enjoy that one far more. Or if you get burnt out on the current Call of Duty after 4 months, that's fine. The hype cycle for the next one is going to be starting soon. That doesn't really work the same way for Battlefield fans that have been more so conditioned to expect a less frequent release cycle, but with better support for each of those games. So it's something that Battlefield fans more so commit to stick.
So if they're going to do this, the essential way that they're going to do this is like for example, the next Battlefield game comes out in 3 years, and then the next Battlefield game comes out in 2 years, and then the next Battlefield game comes out in 1 year, and then 1 year, and then like that's how they're going to have to do that kind of
over
thing.
Multiple years. So I do think if this ends up coming true and like 5 years from now we start getting an annual release for Battlefield, that's just going to be a very clear signal that they don't really care about the current Battlefield community and the Battlefield veterans out there. And instead, this would signal a commitment to developing a new, younger audience that maybe tends to burn out easily, but is more willing to shell out year after year for a shiny new product instead of committing to one product for multiple years. And if we're looking at the long-term health of the franchise, honestly, it's probably the right business move to be making, because the current core dedicated Battlefield fan base is already on the older side, I would guess. And they're not going to be getting any younger, and more of them will continue falling off and having less and less time to game or less and less interest in gaming. And therefore, if you want to keep the franchise thriving long term,
Part of me wonders if they leak this to see the public reaction. No, like they didn't leak this. They said it in like an interview. And no, I don't think they did. I think from a CEO standpoint, this makes the most sense. The Call of Duty mod, there's a reason why Call of Duty is like one of the #1 grossing games of all time, because they built a business model that's sustainable in this way, and it makes sense that another company wants to copy it.
You do have to bring those new players in. You do have to replace those older players that are cycling out, even if it means doing so sort of forcefully. I'm not saying I like it by any means. In fact, I feel like this has been happening over the years with Call of Duty as well. As somebody that's been a very dedicated fan for about 20 years now with Call of Duty, I no longer feel like the target audience for Call of Duty. That's one of the reasons I'm making this video today and many other videos like it with Battlefield, is I largely just feel disenfranchised with the current state of Call of Duty because it doesn't seem to be appealing to me anymore, and it seems they're more so trying to target that younger audience, which is obviously not a great feeling. I really don't like it. But if you try to put yourself in the shoes of the people
I feel old
that are making those big picture long-term decisions, it does start to make sense when you see decisions like this being made. So there we go. Those are all of my thoughts on this news, or this rumor that's taking place right now. I really don't like the idea of Battlefield going annual, but honestly, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see them go in this direction. Now, of course, these are just my thoughts, and I'd love to hear what you guys think about this news in those comments down below. First off, do you think this will actually happen down the road?
I think they'll go to 2 years is what I actually think will happen. I'm curious what the comments on this one say too. We've been heavily into comments today. Battlefield 6 becomes a yearly cycle. Call of Duty becomes a 6-month cycle. I said that this is not a unquestionable thing. Having a remake and a new Call of Duty every single year, I would not be surprised. Please don't. This does not spark joy. I don't think EA/DICE has the resources to make a game like Battlefield yearly, unless they do 2042 quality. Interesting. See, that's like an actual good comment. Like with, so instead of being blown out of sales, call it. Well, I think also part of the decision will depend on whether or not they do outsell Call of Duty. Why not bring back Medal of Honor at this point? I'd be down. Battlefield Hardline was a heavily criticized for looking like a DLC for Battlefield 4. Also, it was by far the worst selling one. So, do I see them doing this? Probably not.